Hey, Karen Julia here, and in this tutorial we're going to talk through setting up your Showit blog so that it can perform well in Google. Now, this tutorial is designed for those brand new to blogging that have just started with Showit and maybe don't have a blog already. However, I think it would still be beneficial for you to watch if you've already got a blog and that blog's been migrated. Word of caution though, some of the settings, making changes to them could have an impact on your current permalinks. We're going to talk about what permalinks are in a minute. So please don't make any changes to the kind of URL structure that you've already got. Rankings can go down as well as up. So it's just a little word of caution there. If you don't rank anywhere at the moment, then it's not really a problem. But I did want to just mention that it's better to be safe than sorry. Okay, so let's dive in. We're going to pop me in the corner and let's have a look at the site. Now, I had intended to talk you through this when it was brand new from scratch, and I ended up just changing the settings, and I got to the end of the settings and I thought, oh my goodness, I was going to record a tutorial. So we're going to walk through them. I've not quite finished doing everything anyway, but we're just going to walk through every setting from scratch and what the best kind of setup would be from an SEO perspective. So this is just the back end of the WordPress blog area. And we're going to start in the WordPress settings here, okay? And we're going to walk through every single one of these settings and talk about what's going to be the kind of best setup and why. So we're going to start off in general. So the first thing you'll see up here is your site title. And when it's set up from Showit, I think it had like Christian Peterson in there or something. It was somebody's name. Now, what I often find in there is photographers and creatives will put their main keyword, but actually that's not what should be in there. The site title is for your brand name. Now, we really want Google to be able to recognize your brand as an entity. That's going to help Google recognize when people talk about you online. And the more popular you are, the bigger a deal you're going to be with Google. As long as those things that people are saying about you are positive, of course. So what should go there is your brand name. So with my wedding photography site, I'm also a wedding photographer, I have Karen Julia Photography there. I don't have my main keyword, which is Glasgow wedding photographer. On my other SEO site, I have Photo SEO Lab, but I don't have SEO for wedding photographers. So please don't be tempted to put your main keyword in there. It is for your brand name. And you'll see we've just got Caledony in here. Now, the tagline, you don't have to put anything in there. You can put your main keyword if you want. It's often not really shown anywhere. It doesn't do any harm to leave it blank or put a free kind of a word in there. So we're just going to put SEO, which is exactly what this little mini micro website is about. It's all about SEO on Showit websites. So moving down, the admin email that I'm using is this one, and this should be the one that is linked to your Showit setup. So I think it's best not to change it. You're better keeping it the same as whatever your Showit email is. We want to check that we're on the right time zone as well. So the default time zone is and the default site language usually need changed. So default time zone is universal time, which is kind of like London. So if you're based in the US, you're going to want to adjust that to your time zone. Also, if you've just got it on like UTC, it doesn't adjust to the actual time zone automatically. And if the time zone's wrong, that can impact whether your posts look as if they've been posted at the right time or not. Because if you post them at a certain time, or say you schedule your posts to be posted at a certain time, and then they end up going out at the wrong time, that can be because your time zone's not set up correctly. So because I know I will never remember to change this when the clocks go forward and back in the spring and the autumn or fall, depending if you're on the other side of the pond, I'm just going to put London in here. So we're going to set it to this, and I'm also going to set the main language to be British English instead of US English. So I'll have to remember and pop my vowels in there. Now this is going to be a multilingual site, so we're going to have more than one language. But when you're having a multilingual site, you just have the default language for this site, and I'm going to be showing in future tutorials how you would deal with additional languages. So we're going to have English UK, and then we've got time zone as London, and I'm just going to leave the date format. I'm not too fussed about that. It doesn't really matter too much. And we're going to just click Save Changes at the bottom there. So once you've sorted your time zone and you've made sure that your site's on the right language, then we can move on to the next thing on this list, which is writing. So the default post category is always uncategorized, and we really don't want to keep that because it's a little bit generic. Well, it's quite generic. It's very generic. So it's best to have a couple of categories set up and just choose one as the default one. So I think most of the content on this site is going to be about learning and SEO tutorials. So I don't really need to have a whole load of different categories. It's going to be fairly simple, but I just want something that's not uncategorized. So if we go to posts here and categories, we can just add a new category. Now, if you're a wedding photographer, your main category, I would just create something like weddings. You don't want to put a keyword in there, okay? Don't be tempted to start adding keywords all over the place. Just keep it very simple, one word. If you mainly do newborns, you just have newborn, okay? Or babies or family or something like that, just one word. Having the categories set up in a way that they can be findable by Google is not necessarily what we want anyway. We'll get to that shortly. So we're going to just quickly skip over to categories, and we're going to add a new one, which I think will just be, should I do tutorials or learn? Let's do learn. Changed my mind. Right. So what you'll be able to see at the moment is that when we hover over tutorials, the delete option comes up, but the delete option doesn't come up when we hover over uncategorized. That's because uncategorized is set as our default category. So what we can do is go to those settings. So we're going to head back to writing. And if we change uncategorized over to tutorials, so tutorials are our default category. If we then head back to categories, we'll be able to delete the uncategorized. There we go, delete. Now you'll see that actually before we do that, there's a post that's already attributed to this category. That post is not going to be deleted when we delete the category. What will happen is it will flip over to tutorials. So don't panic that you're going to delete posts accidentally or anything. You won't do that when you're changing a category. So if we just click delete here and click OK, and then hit refresh, what should happen in theory, do you see now that post has just flipped over there? Okay, so back to writing. So now that we've got that to tutorials, we don't need to change anything else on here. We can move on to reading. So the homepage displays, this is kind of controlled by Showit anyway. We've got it set to a static page, so don't touch anything there. We can just leave these settings. What is really important, see this search engine visibility, make sure there's not a tick in that box. What can sometimes happen is when a website is being designed, a designer can put a tick in that box to stop Google crawling the site before it's finished, before the design is launched. I'm not doing that with this. I've kind of just set it up a couple of days ago and I'm wanting to get it all built really quickly. The problem with blocking the search engine bots is that when you're ready to launch and you want them to come back again, sometimes that can take a while. So my kind of recommendation for the site design process is actually that the site is designed on a staging site so that you don't have the risk of forgetting to untick boxes, or you don't have a situation where Google finds a site, sees that it's blocked from indexing, and then you struggle to get it come back again. So yeah, but aside from all that, just make sure there's not a tick in that box, because otherwise you're essentially saying to Google, this is not for public consumption, this is not for the index. So let's move on to discussion. Now, what can happen when you have the facility for adding comments is that you just get absolutely inundated with spam. If your site's not ranking very well in Google, you might not get much spam, but as soon as you start ranking well, you are going to be inundated. Now, the way that people interact in blog posts, you don't tend to get potential customers or clients commenting on blog posts anymore. Like even in the industry where it's podcast websites and industry websites, people just don't tend to behave like that on websites. We've got so many different social media platforms where, users can interact. So it's just not really a thing that's on trend anymore. So what I tend to do is I keep these link notifications switched on, but I untick this box. So this has usually got a tick in it. It certainly did have when I just got the site from brand new. And if you just untick that so that people aren't allowed to submit comments on new posts. I've also got added a tick to the box that says the user must be registered and logged into comment, and also automatically close comments on posts older than, let's say, 1 day. Okay. So you kind of just don't want people to be able to comment. Also, the avatars, this is usually ticked. Just switch that off because people aren't going to be leaving comments and you don't want to have anything loaded up on the site that you don't need. Just keep it simple. So that's all the settings for this. Essentially, we don't want people commenting on your posts, and having lots and lots of comments on a post can actually have a bit of a negative impact on the SEO performance of that page, because a bot looks at everything on the page, including the comments. And if there's more comments than text that you've created, that can end up in a negative thing. So it's not always negative, but it is something that does have an element of risk. And for most part, just causes a lot of admin because of all the spammers. So we're going to move on to media. Now, these are the default settings. We're not going to touch anything in here. We're just going to leave it as is. You don't need to change anything. The next one, though, is really important, and this is permalinks. Now, this is where if you migrated a blog over, please don't make any changes to your existing permalink structure, even if it's wrong. Because Google's official advice, and I would totally agree with their best practice guidelines, is that when you're doing any migration or change, you don't want to change too many things at once. So it's best to keep things like permalinks and your page names and everything the same. And then after you've migrated site, maybe from wherever you were to Showit, give it 4 to 6 weeks, possibly longer, even like 3 months for everything to settle down. And then make any changes that you're going to make. Do it in a kind of phased way. Don't just kind of change everything, because it can have a really negative effect on your performance. When people get in touch with me and they say, I've moved to Showit and my rankings have dropped, and I say, okay, well, let's have a look. And I see that they've completely changed their URL structure. So Google's seeing all their content as brand new and they've not done any redirects. And, it can end up being that it wasn't so much the move to Showit that caused the problem. It's because they didn't do a migration of their site properly. So whatever your permalinks are, keep them the same. Okay, right. Now that we've got that out of the way though, if you're setting up a blog from brand new from scratch, now, when I first got this installed and looked at it, it was this plain thing at the top here that was ticked. You do not want to have that setting for your permalinks, okay? Because all it is a question mark, P equals, and a number. And that is not going to help Google understand what your content is about at all. So it should be on post name. Don't put any other fancy stuff in there. Just post name, that's it. Save changes. Okay, so the next thing down is your privacy policy. Now, depending where you are in the world, this might be a legal requirement. In the EU, it certainly is. I can't really launch a site without it. If it's not a legal requirement in your country, because things like privacy have just become more and more important, and because your clients might be in a region in the world outside of your country, I would still encourage you to have it. And you want to have it kind of labeled. So whatever your privacy policy page is, you should select it within here. This also should be linked to in the footer of your site as well. So that's really important. And what that means with it being in the footer, and I know sometimes when I say footer, it can be misunderstood in my accent. So let me just show you. Back end of Showit, let's see. And this is my site that I've not built yet. Literally just installed. So by footer, I mean this thing, okay? Just in case you're not getting the accent. Alrighty, let's go back to the WordPress site. Okay, so you just need to make sure you've got a privacy policy and it's selected in here, okay? And then that is it for the main settings. So we're going to have a look at a couple of other things, just to kind of talk about best practices, but we're going to cover those in another tutorial. So feel free to have a look at the tutorials, and they will all be labeled with the different areas. We're going to have one talking about plugins and best practice for plugins for Showit sites, and we're going to have other areas talking about your kind of post best practice and SEO plugins and a whole host of other things that I hope are going to be really beneficial and useful to everybody. But that's it for this tutorial, so I look forward to seeing you in future tutorials. And if there's any questions that you have, or you would like a tutorial on something that you don't see on the website, then feel free to shoot me an email and I will add it to my tutorial making queue. Awesome. All right, I'll speak to you guys soon. Cheers.